Notre Dame spring practice is in the books, and look, I was already high on this team going in, but after the past 15 practices, I am even more convinced that this team has the potential to have a special season in 2025. That's next.
You are Locked On Irish, your daily podcast on the Notre Dame Fighting Irish, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, what's going on, and welcome in to Locked On Irish, your daily Notre Dame podcast. My name is Tyler Wojciak, and I'm the host. I'm a Notre Dame alum and producer at Fox Sports, and it is great to have you here with me on Thursday, April 24th, and thank you for making this your first listen of the day. Before we get rolling, I'd like to ask that you please take a second to make sure that you are subscribed on YouTube or wherever you are listening to the podcast, but especially those of you watching along on YouTube, because we are getting close to that 10,000 subscriber mark, so make sure that you are subscribed to the channel. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $250 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. And let's get into it. So Notre Dame wrapped up spring practice on Wednesday with their 15th and final practice of the spring. And Marcus Freeman put a stamp on the whole thing with his final press conference this spring. There are also 2 days left in the transfer portal window, which means there could still be some movement over the course of these next few days. It officially closes on Friday, but we have not heard anything major up to this point other than that Steve Angeli officially committed to Syracuse. But we're going to keep an eye on the portal for these next few days. But as for today's show, we're going to start with my big picture takeaway about spring practice and why I am more optimistic about this team than I was a month ago. Then we're going to dive into what Freeman had to say in his press conference as he shared some insights on injuries, roster limits, the transfer portal, and even the possibility of Tyler Buchner moving back to quarterback. And finally, we're going to take a look ahead to the NFL draft, which starts tonight, and I'm going to have my final predictions for where Notre Dame's draft eligible players will land. But let's talk about my big takeaway here for the spring. I've kind of alluded to this before in recent shows here, but I feel a lot better about Notre Dame's 2025 outlook today than I did before spring ball started, and there were plenty of reasons to be excited about this team going in. They have a bunch of talented returning starters coming back, including arguably the best player in the country in Jeremiah Love and maybe the best cornerback in the country in Leonard Moore. They also made some nice additions to the transfer portal while they were getting ready to play in the college football playoffs. So I feel like some of those additions kind of got lost in the shuffle, like adding Malachi Fields and adding Devontae Smith. Those were big-time additions, but we were so focused on playing Indiana and playing Georgia that those acquisitions didn't get quite the level of fanfare that they would if Notre Dame wasn't in the playoff and there just wasn't as much to talk about. But they've also been recruiting well, so there's a bunch of talent on this roster. But, there's also a lot of unknowns. Like, they lost a ton of great players and great leaders after last season, like Riley Leonard, Xavier Watts, Riley Mills, Howard Cross, Mitchell Evans, and two of those players, Cross and Mills, play one of the most important positions in football, defensive tackle, and I had some major concerns about the depth of that position. They also brought in a new defensive coordinator to replace the Broyles Award winner last year, Al Golden, and they had a wide-open three-man quarterback competition with a combined one start among the three competitors. And obviously, spring practice is not a time to answer all the questions you might have about a team, and there are still some questions that need to be answered and cannot be answered until they actually take the field in the fall. But spring practice can provide some answers about the roster and the depth, and based on what we've seen and heard about the roster and what this team was able to accomplish on the practice field over the course of this past month, I feel better about nearly every single position on the roster with just a couple exceptions. Let's start with the quarterback room. I think they exceeded my expectations. The quarterback competition was always going to be the story of the spring, but each player stepped up and performed at a high level. CJ Carr showed really high-level flashes, especially in the spring game. He showed poise, elite accuracy, and command for a redshirt freshman. And then Kenny Minchey had the best spring practice of his Notre Dame career, his third spring practice with the team. He was very efficient in live periods, and we know how important that is for this team and this quarterback evaluation. He showed what he can do with his legs. That's something that he brought to the table that, quite frankly, none of the other guys could do quite as well as him. And he proved a lot of people wrong. Like I've said over and over, I've been wrong about Kenny Minchey and what he would do this spring. So all credit goes out to Kenny Minchey and CJ Carr, because Steve Angeli was solid as well, but he wasn't able to hold off the young up-and-comers, and now he's committed to play for Syracuse, and he's going to face Notre Dame this November. Just crazy how it all worked out. And even though Carr nor Minchie won the job. They performed so well that they beat out the most experienced option who had been the backup for the past 2 seasons. The ceiling for Carr is incredibly high, and he flashed. Kenny Minchie also has a ton of potential as well, so the future is really bright at quarterback, and that was always going to be the biggest storyline going in the spring. Meanwhile, the running back room, they look like they're the deepest and most talented unit in the entire country. You know what you're getting in Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price. That is a special combination of 2 players. We didn't really see a ton from them this spring. Actually, Jeremiah Love tweaked his hamstring in the Jersey scrimmage. I don't think there's anything more to add there. Just he needed a rest, and he did. Jadarian Price, same deal. But Keidron Young, Aeneas Williams, they took advantage of the opportunities. 2 young guys trying to get some more carries and more touches this season. Jerron Payne looked really good after he suffered that torn ACL last spring. And then Nolan James Jr., the early enrollee freshman, he impressed as well. So this is not going to be the same unit that Notre Dame has in fall camp. There is going to be some attrition in this room because they just have so many talented guys that there's just not enough touches to go around. So some of these guys are probably going to leave in the transfer portal over the course of these next couple of days. But the room is so deep and so talented, and they have been doing so well in the recruiting trail. They have so much momentum. The future of the running back position is fine for Notre Dame. I would not say I have stock up on the wide receivers, though. I feel about the same. It's not like I'm stocked down on them, but considering 3 out of Notre Dame's top 4 wide receivers were limited or absent this spring, like Malachi Fields, who did not participate at all. Jordan Faison was limited. Will Pauling was limited. And we didn't really see that much from Jaden Greathouse either. It's really hard to say that anyone, changed the dynamic of this room. Like Elijah Burris, the early enrollee freshman, certainly was impressive, but I don't even know if he's going to crack the rotation because Mikey Gilbert was the wide receiver I was most excited to see this spring. He's going to be a redshirt freshman this year. Well, he broke a couple fingers on the first day of practice. So I felt like if there was going to be an X factor in this room, it would have been him. Elijah Burris kind of stepped into that role, but he's still a freshman. We're going to see if he actually makes a dent on the depth chart this year, but he certainly made a case to do that with his play in the spring. Cam Williams didn't really take that next step that a lot of fans are hoping for. He's young. He's still got a bunch of time, but it didn't really seem like KK Smith made a big step either. So Notre Dame has 4 guys right now that they're going to count on in Greathouse, Faison, Fields, and Pauling, but after that, it's kind of a crapshoot. So we'll see what happens with the wide receivers. I don't feel that much better or worse about them after spring. I do feel slightly better about the tight ends, though. This is entirely due to the play of Eli Raridan, who could be ready to have a Jonas Gray, Ismar Blau breakout season. I'm sure when Luke Smith and I do our preseason awards, he's going to be that guy that we talk about, a senior who has a breakthrough season. I am still concerned about the depth of the room, but Jack Larson and Kevin Bauman look good in the spring game, so that's encouraging. The offensive line could be elite. Felt good about it going in. Feel even better now. I really love the move to put Charles Jagasaw at right guard. I think that is where he's going to play at the next level. And now with him and Shrouth in the interior, those are 2 bullies in the middle of that offensive line. I was disappointed that Gerby Lambert didn't really have a chance to do all that much outside of the first half of spring because he suffered that shoulder injury. But it was good that Anthony Knapp and Billy Shrouth were able to recover from their injuries and participate in the spring game. And if Notre Dame runs out there against Miami week 1 with the starting offensive line of Anthony Knapp at left tackle, Billy Shrouth at left guard, either Ashton Craig or Sullivan Absher at center, Charles Jagasaw right guard, and Emil Wagner at right tackle. That is a very, very good unit with Gerby Lambert first tackle off the bench, and we'll see what happens with Absher and Craig, but I think Absher could play both those guard positions. So they have really elite high-end talent and good depth at those positions as well. Defensive tackle, I said it before, this was the position group that I had the most questions about going into the spring, and I think they made the biggest jump of any position group on the roster. Jared Dawson, the transfer from Louisville, looks like an absolute force in the middle. He looks like a bona fide hit. He's not going to rack up stats, but he's going to disrupt what the offense is trying to do. And the re-addition, I guess you should say, of Jason Onye cannot be understated. I really did not expect him to ever play another snap for Notre Dame, but he's doing a lot more than that. He's back with the team. He looks healthy. He looks like he's getting back into football shape, and he was arguably the defensive MVP of the Jersey scrimmage. So that is a huge piece for this defensive tackle room. Gabriel Rubio was able to stay healthy, which is great. Donnie Heinisch. I said Donnie because Marcus Freeman called him that today, and that kind of caught me off guard. Donovan Heinisch did not stay healthy, but you're getting with him Elijah Hughes, Sean Sevillano Jr., Armel Mukum. Those are really solid options at 5 through 7 in that room, so feel a lot better about the defensive tackles. And for all the concerns I had about D-tackle, I felt like the defensive ends were really good, and they're actually ahead of schedule because Botello and Traore should be full go by the summer. Logan Thomas appears to have taken another step forward. I think Bryce Young has superstar potential. We're going to see that this year. Kind of a quiet spring from Josh Burnham, but he was recovering from an injury as well. And then Junior Tuihalamaka is right there when needed. At linebacker, I feel even better about them because even though they lost Jack Heiser, Drake Bowen, KVA, and Jalen Sneed and Jane Osprey all appear to have taken a big step forward, but none more than Jalen Sneed. I talked about him earlier this week as maybe the biggest riser on the defense of anyone this spring. He's bigger, he's stronger, he's just as athletic as he was before, and if he's just able to be consistent and not make any mental mistakes, we could see the best version of Jalen Sneed, and that best version could probably live up to that 5-star hype that he had coming out of high school. Drake Bowen has stepped up as a leader. Kingston Viliamu-Asa was unblockable in the spring game in the limited amount of time that he was out there. He racked up 2 tackles for loss. So that linebacker room is going to be so good. They're not just young and talented anymore. They're older, they're experienced, and they are absolutely loaded with talent. Cornerback room, also loaded with talent. Don't feel that much better or worse about Leonard Moore or Christian Gray because I felt good about them going into spring, right? That's an elite cornerback duo. They now have a full season of experience under their belt, but I feel a lot better about Carson Hobbs, a player who I didn't really think about all that much going into spring practice, but the way that he performed throughout the spring, like he's going to force himself onto the field. And Devontae Smith, that transfer from Alabama, he showed why sources inside the program were raving about him during winter workouts. I like to say it all the time in the show. He's a grown-ass man. He's a physical player. He's going to be really good for the Irish this year at nickel. And then at safety, what you've got in Don Schuler, but Luke Talich and Tay Johnson stepped up to the plate, and they delivered during spring practice. Notre Dame brought in Jalen Stroman to start opposite Adon Schuler. I think he will start, but Luke Talich and Tay Johnson are not going out without a fight. I feel a lot better about them, and Notre Dame is going to be able to rotate those guys in a lot more. They didn't have to rotate last year when they had Xavier Watts and Adon Schuler. They are going to have to rotate a lot more this year because you just can't replace a guy like Xavier Watts, and Luke Talich and Tay Johnson are great options to do that. So, you could counter this argument by saying, well, we don't know how all of this is going to translate in the fall, and I would say that's fair. Sometimes spring can be misleading about 1 or 2 players, but the way that every single position group had multiple guys step up and shine in spring practice when Notre Dame put them out there in pressure situations, I think that tells you just how deep this roster is because we already knew about the talent at the top, but we saw last year they're going to really have to count on their depth. Hopefully not quite to the extent that they did last year, given the rash of injuries that they suffered throughout the 16-game season, but they are going to have to count on their backups, not just the starters, and Notre Dame appears to have some really high-end talent at the starting spots, but then behind them, some young guys or even some older guys like Junior Tuihalamaka who are ready to go when their number is called. And I just think that this group has more talent than last year, which feels crazy to say because that group made it all the way to the national championship. So they're going to need some things to go their way, but I don't know how you couldn't be very, very excited about this team going into the fall. But don't just take my word for it. Take Marcus Freeman, who said he was really impressed with what he saw from his team. He also dropped some key injury and roster updates, and we'll cover all of that coming right up. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. The NBA playoffs are here, and FanDuel is giving new customers an incredible way to get in on the action. Right now, when you join FanDuel and place your first $5 bet, you'll get $250 in bonus bets if your bet wins. I love how FanDuel makes betting so easy, whether it's picking my favorite team or diving into player props. From three-pointers to steals to assists, FanDuel has so many ways to bet your favorite player props. Plus, after the game tips off, you can even combine live prop bets into a same-game parlay for a chance to win big. All right, I'll give out a pick for tonight. Thursday, looking at the odds here on FanDuel. Okay, so the Thunder are favored by 8.5 on the road against the Grizzlies. That's a lot of points for a road team, but they have been smacking the Grizzlies. This isn't even close. I think that the Grizzlies are going to fold. They're going to give up. So give me the Thunder to cover 8.5 points on the road tonight in the NBA playoffs. So don't miss out. Head to FanDuel.com and claim your $250 in bonus bets today. So Marcus Freeman had his last press conference of the spring and basically put a bow on everything that we had seen and heard over the past month. And there were some key updates, but one thing that I thought was interesting when he started out, he had his opening statement, and he said that the team was focused on three things. And it's basically like playing Marcus Freeman bingo at this point in time, right? Because he always has some catchphrases, right? Last year it was all about team glory, but all about, reaching your full potential, one more guaranteed opportunity, all that stuff. Well, it sounds like we've got some new ones going into this year. So he started off by saying that they focused on chasing their full potential. That's not necessarily a new one. But the second one was they focused on building and elevating trust. That's kind of new, but it also makes sense because they lost a lot of great leaders after last year. They're bringing in a new defensive coordinator, new running backs coach as well. So even though there's some things that are the same, there's a lot of new faces in that room, not to mention the personnel department who has a new general manager, and they're really filling out that room or that department in a much different way than the previous regime under Chad Bones. So I think building and elevating trust is important because you need that for any team. We talk a lot about leadership, right? And how the best programs are typically player-driven programs where, yes, obviously the coaches, they help establish the standard and the culture, but then it's on the players to hold their teammates accountable. The best teams typically are player-driven. So as long as the players trust each other, that's one step forward in getting this program back to a player-driven program, much like it was last year. Like Jack Kaiser, Watts, Leonard, all those guys were basically coaches on the field, and I think they're trying to replicate that this year with some guys who haven't really been in those types of roles before. And then the third thing he said, he told his team that they need to understand that for all the work they're putting in now, there's going to be delayed gratification, which makes sense. They're putting in long hours in March and April, but they really won't be able to see the fruits of their labor, the satisfaction of winning those games until the fall, right? So it's a little bit different. It's more of a grind. I always joke that for those early enrollee freshmen who are just coming out of high school, right, where they're the man, they're the king of their school, they've been the best athlete in their town for their whole lives, and then they get dropped into a place like Notre Dame where you have really competitive classrooms, and then you have to go on the football field and play against guys who are a lot older than you, and not to mention the fact that the weather in South Bend, at least at the start of the semester, is terrible. But if they're able to get through that and they're able to get to this point and they're able to get through the grind of all that without the gratification of playing in a game or anything like that, then they've already gotten through the hardest part, and it's going to get better from here as the games get closer and closer to happening. But a couple other things that really stood out to me from Marcus Freeman's press conference is what he had to say about the quarterback competition. I think he feels very good about CJ Carr and Kenny Minchey. I don't think he's blowing smoke. He kind of talked about the competition as like a great problem to have. And even though he was obviously disappointed to see Steve Angeli leave, this is just kind of what was happening. He even referenced his own quote when he said after the spring game that they needed two quarterbacks for the fall. He said it's because, there were some practices where each quarterback would get like 12 reps with the first team. And that's one way to disperse the reps amongst three guys. But then as you get closer to the season, you just need more reps than that. So they had to whittle it down to two. They did with Kenny Minchey and CJ Carr. But he also brought up the possibility of moving Tyler Buchner back to quarterback. He was a walk-on wide receiver last season. I think he was just happy to be back on the team, but they did trust him in a couple of instances, right? He came in on a fake field goal where he ran the ball, acting as Cameron Salerno, and then there was the play against USC where he came in on punt and actually threw the ball to Mitchell Evans. So I think he's going to now move over and basically take Steve Angeli's spot in the room because I don't think the coaching staff wants Blake Hebert to play in any meaningful moment this season. So if a disaster occurs and Carr and Minchey somehow end up getting hurt, at least when you bring in Tyler Buchner, he's not going to be afraid of the moment, and you can just run read option to the opponent to death, and he's probably going to be really good at it because he's proven that he's good at it before. So they're going to have more conversations. He did not say it's a done deal, but I think that'd be a really cool story if Tyler Buchner does end up moving back to quarterback. And I just want to get this prediction out there right now as we sit here April 24th. Tyler Buchner will score a touchdown for Notre Dame this season. I don't know when, I don't know how, but he's going to do it. And when it happens, I'm going to go back, I'm going to bring up this moment right here. So mark this down on a piece of paper, on your phone, or just put it in your memory bank because we are going to revisit this in the fall. Mark it down. He also talked about roster management and some of the implications at the transfer portal. Like I said, 2 more days left. And they asked him about the 105-man roster cap, which is not official. They're still waiting to hear from the House and what they decide and what the judge decides about the new roster limits and with revenue sharing and all of that. That's byproduct of all of that. We're going to have more conversations about that on the show once we find out whether it's going to go into effect or not. But he said over and over, they have a plan, whether it gets passed or not, and they're going to have some really difficult conversations. Right now, Notre Dame is 13 players over, 105-man limit, and as part of that, he said that they're not really looking to add in the transfer portal. If something comes up, they're not going to just turn it down for the sake of turning it down. If there's an option or an opportunity for Notre Dame to get better, they'll look into it, but I think they feel really good about the roster they have. I mean, I just laid out why I feel so good about the roster. If they were going to add anything, I would just say another tight end because Cooper Flanagan is out for the season, but I think they feel really good about the roster, and I do think that they expect some attrition on their own roster because, otherwise they're going to have to cut more players. And some of the walk-ons are put in a really tight spot because they're fighting for those final few spots on the 105-man roster, but then they have to decide whether or not to enter the transfer portal now and just leave and not wait and see what happens, or they might hold out, wait and see, and then if there's a 105-man roster and then they don't make it, then they get cut, and then it's hard to transfer. So it's a really unfortunate situation for those guys, especially those walk-ons. So hoping for the best for all of them, but it is going to be a very difficult time for these coaches as they navigate these waters and have some pretty tough conversations with some guys who have given a lot to this program. He also shared some important injury updates, a couple of them. I think the most notable is that Boubacar Traore, Jordan Botelho, Kahanu Kia, and Ashton Craig are all going to be able to participate full go in the summer. This has sort of been talked about before. Traore and Botelho said that they had been really going at it hard in their rehab. Rob Hunt raved about Jordan Botelho. So that's great that they're going to be able to participate in the summer and then hopefully be able to ramp up so that when fall camp comes around, they're ready to go at full speed. Kahanu Kia is a good player, another linebacker who's older because he had the 2-year mission trip, but he had 1 million tackles in the spring game last year. So, if he's back out there, that's just more depth in that room. And Ashton Craig, we had not heard quite as much about his recovery, but it's good that he's going to be back in the summer because he's going to have to work hard to keep that starting spot. He played really well when he was out there, but then he got hurt in that game against Purdue, and now Sullivan Absher is doing whatever he possibly can to get on the field, and part of that means shifting over to center. He played tackle a couple of years ago. Now he's getting reps at center. He was the starting center in the spring game with the rest of the ones. So it's great that they're going to have all those guys back, and I think overall it was a pretty healthy spring despite the fact that they did lose Gerby Lambert and Davion Dixon. They're going to continue to work into full training activities during the summer. They both had surgery, so it's going to be some time. He did not specify which part of the summer, like if Gerby Lambert's going to be healthy in August, who knows? But you would hope that Lambert is ready to go for the fall because he's going to be the first tackle off the bench at left tackle or right tackle. He had a chance to potentially win a starting job this spring, but because he got hurt, I don't think that's going to happen, at least at the beginning of the season. But we'll see. You never know. Injuries could happen. He could end up starting at some point this season. And then he also kind of confirmed everything we already knew, that Cooper Flanagan is likely out for the year because he suffered a ruptured Achilles in the first quarter of that game against Georgia. So that's really all I have for spring practice on this show. Greg Famung from Irish Sports Daily will be back on the show tomorrow. If you remember, Greg joined us before spring practice to preview what we were watching for, and now he's going to return to help us review how everything played out. So make sure you tune in to that tomorrow. But meanwhile, the NFL draft kicks off tonight. So let's talk through where each Notre Dame guy could land and how it might shake out for the former Irish Stars hoping to have their name called in the NFL draft. Today's episode is brought to you by Amazon Fire TV Stick 4K. Did you know your Fire TV is also an Xbox? Turn any TV into your gaming and entertainment hub with Fire TV Stick 4K devices. No console required. Just grab your paired controller, subscribe, or sign in to Xbox Game Pass Ultimate with EA Play included, and you're ready to play. Dive into hundreds of premium titles from EA Sports College Football 25 to Call of Duty Black Ops 6 and Avowed as easily as you stream your favorite shows. It's gaming made simple, and it's all on your Fire TV. With 4K streaming, watch more than 1.5 million movies and TV episodes from your favorite subscribed devices like Netflix, Prime Video, Disney+, Max, and more. Fire TV Stick 4K has endless entertainment options, whether you are a hardcore gamer or love watching shows and movies. Head to Amazon.com/FireTV Lockdown to get started. Xbox Game Pass Ultimate subscription and compatible controller required. Available on select devices including Fire TV Stick 4K 2nd Gen, Fire TV Stick 4K Max 1st and 2nd Gen, and Fire TV Cube 3rd Gen. All right, let's wrap things up with some predictions. I'm going to go through every draft-eligible player for Notre Dame who has a realistic chance of getting their name called in the NFL draft. So the first round is tonight, and unfortunately, I don't think there's going to be a single Notre Dame player who gets their name called tonight, which is pretty surprising considering this team just went to the national championship. And if Benjamin Morrison had not gotten hurt this year, I think he was a surefire first-round pick. But now, after everything that's happened, I think Xavier Watts is going to be the first Notre Dame player off the board. So he's a projected second rounder. Great for him because I think last year when he was considering leaving after he had that amazing second half of the season in 2023, he was looking at fourth round, maybe third. Well, now he seems like he's solid in the second round. I've seen him as high as the 42nd pick in a mock draft. But the most interesting thing I saw was Dane Brugler from The Athletic, who puts out the Beast every single year, which is like the most detailed, comprehensive draft guide there is. I'm not like the biggest NFL draft guy in the world. I like to see where Notre Dame players get selected, and I like to see how the Browns manage to screw it up every single year. It's actually impressive how consistently bad they are at drafting. They've had some accidental hits in the past, like Joe Thomas, but just whatever they do, you can count on it being the wrong thing, and that's coming from a Browns fan. So we'll see what they do. But in the same division, AFC North, Dane Brugler has Xavier Watts going to the Baltimore Ravens. Can you imagine Xavier Watts, Kyle Hamilton lining up on the same defense? Possibly certainly two of the most talented. Harrison Smith, obviously, up there as well. But the two of the best safeties to come through Notre Dame in recent years. That would be really, really cool to see. And it'd be awesome to see the Browns quarterback, whoever that may be, just throw pick after pick after pick to the Ravens secondary. So really excited to see Xavier Watts get drafted because, man, nobody earns it more after his journey. Then I think Benjamin Morrison is going to get drafted late second, potentially even third round, which feels crazy to say because going into the season, he felt like a surefire first-round pick, but then he had the shoulder injury in the spring that required surgery and then the hip injury in the fall. He didn't get to participate in the combine, didn't get to participate in pro day, and then had his own personal workout the week of the draft, but then didn't do any of the athletic tests. He did run drills and he looked healthy, but still, I think some teams are going to have their concerns about what he can do or at least how healthy he can stay at the next level. I still think he's going to end up at like late second round, because his tape in 2023 was just that good, and I think he's just like such a good cover corner. But if he slides to the third round, that's really unfortunate for him, but I think some team is getting a steal. Now, what about the quarterback, Riley Leonard? I think he's going to get drafted because his size, his speed, his measurables, like there's going to be a GM who looks at him and is like, I can fix him. I can figure it out. Sure, he was never really accurate in college, can't really throw the deep ball all that well, but look at him. Okay, so there's definitely going to be a GM who is very confident in his development and their program's development. So I think Riley Leonard is going to get drafted, but probably not until sixth round at the earliest. I think he's probably going to end up in the final round, the seventh round. But then Riley Mills, this is very interesting because Mel Kiper has him being selected in the third round of a mock draft. And then there are other guys who have him not getting drafted at all. This is obviously because he suffered a torn ACL in the college football playoff when he actually was in the backfield making a great play against Indiana. So he's probably not going to be able to do much at all this year in his rookie season. But at the same time, if he had not suffered that injury, he's probably going third or fourth round, and he could have potentially boosted his stock even more because he would have dominated at the combine, the pro day, all that stuff. So I'm going to say I think he's going to get drafted in the fourth round because I think teams are going to see him, look at his production the past couple of seasons, and look at his measurables and think, hey, get him healthy. He's going to be fine. He was actually pretty healthy overall for his time at Notre Dame. So I think Riley Mills is going to go fourth round, but you look at all the different mocks out there, no one is higher ceiling or lower floor. Like it's all over the place with Riley Mills. Jack Kaiser, I think you can expect him to get taken in the fifth round. He's going to be he's going to make an immediate impact on special teams. Even when he was playing a lot at Notre Dame, he was still a special teams mainstay. He took a lot of pride in that, and he was really good at it. So he could plug and play for any team that drafts him on a lot of their special teams. He has a really high floor. He's a great football IQ. He is a tireless worker. I know the joke's been made before that whoever drafts Jack Kaiser, the backup linebacker, you can just get another job or look somewhere else because Jack Kaiser is going to outwork you. He's going to beat you out. I think he's very similar to J.D. Bertrand, who also went in the fifth round last year to the Atlanta Falcons. And I think Mitchell Evans is going to be drafted in the fifth round as well. He had a really good pro day. I credit him for going out there and doing everything in the combine, even though his numbers weren't spectacular, because I think he's really been trying to prove a point that he's back and he's healthy and ready to go after he suffered the torn ACL in October of 2023. And then he followed it up with a really impressive performance at the Pro Day when he improved in every single metric, when he was a little bit more removed from the season, had more time to prepare for all the different things that they have to do at the Combine and the Pro Day. So he's going to get drafted later than I probably would have expected if he didn't get hurt, but he's got great size, great hands, is a very capable blocker as well. So I think that's another guy who could be a steal, but that's probably it for the guys who are going to get drafted. Unfortunately, I think Howard Cross, his limitations with the size are going to prevent him from getting drafted. Bo Collins might, because he can jump really high and he's fast, but the drops are just such a big problem at Notre Dame, and I felt like he took a lot of plays off. So I don't think he's going to get drafted. Same with Jane Harrison, RJ Oben, Rod Hurd, Jordan Clark. I love him as a player, but he's just a little bit undersized. And Chris Mitchell. These guys at best are getting drafted in the 7th round. I would love to see Howard Cross get drafted because I think he could work his way onto a team. And he could certainly work his way onto a team even if he doesn't get drafted. But all in all, I project 6 total draft picks, which is pretty light for a team, especially one coming off a national championship, but I expect that number to increase in a big way here in the coming years because there is a lot of talent on the Notre Dame roster. So I think that's a perfect way to bookend today's show as I'm talking about all the talent in Notre Dame's current roster, the guys who are out the door, but the fact that they have a lot of future NFL players replacing them. That's going to do it for today's show. Don't forget, Greg Flamong, Irish Sports Daily, back on the show tomorrow. And then at some point next week, I'm going to do some draft stuff as well, talk about all the guys that got drafted, how they fit, so on and so forth. And then we'll have plenty of off-season coverage coming your way. So make sure that you are subscribed on YouTube or wherever you listen to the podcast. And if you liked what you saw today, please give this video a like on YouTube, or if you're listening to the podcast, rate the show 5 stars and maybe even leave a review if you're feeling so kind. But I appreciate it, and I will see you on Friday.